Live from London, this is BBC News. The military junta in Myanmar says it needs outside help following a powerful earthquake that has wreaked severe damage across the country. Big tremors were felt right across Southeast Asia. Skyscrapers in Bangkok, 600 miles away, shook for several minutes. One high-rise building under construction has collapsed with 90 people on site. A state of emergency is in place in Thailand, where emergency workers are searching for survivors that might still be trapped in that rubble. The Israeli forces have warned people in southern Beirut they need to leave after rockets were fired into Israel earlier this morning. There have been airstrikes in southern Lebanon and a first strike in Beirut since November's truce. And King Charles has left Clarence House this morning for Highgrove. He's been suffering the after effects of his latest round of cancer treatment. His official duties were cancelled today. Hello, I'm Christian Fraser. Welcome to BBC News Now. A state of emergency is in place across an enormous swathe of Southeast Asia after a powerful earthquake shook Myanmar, Thailand and parts of southwest China. The main quake came during the early afternoon. It was recorded at 7.7 magnitude and just 6 miles deep. The epicentre was close to Myanmar's second city, Mandalay. But there were powerful tremors felt some 600 miles away in the Thai capital Bangkok and far beyond. 10 minutes later, there was a strong aftershock of 6.4. The reports of damage from Myanmar have been slow to emerge. This is a country embroiled in a civil war. But in the last hour, the ruling military have asked for international help, which is rare. The Red Cross said there are downed power lines in the Mandalay and Zagang regions. We've seen videos and pictures of bridges collapsing, pagodas and temples destroyed, and there are real concerns now about the safety of several important dams. The pictures of the roads which you're looking at, which buckled around the capital, Naypyidaw, will give you some idea of the force of the quake. A major hospital in the capital has been declared a mass casualty area. There are reports that some of the injured are being treated outdoors. Big tremors too in the Thai capital Bangkok. The Department of Disaster Prevention there said the quake was felt in almost every region of the country. There are 17 million people in Bangkok and the surrounding suburbs, many of whom live in these high-rise apartments. The main focus right now, though, is a rescue effort at a construction site in central Bangkok. They were pictures widely circulated on social media of a multi-storey building which collapsed with a crane on top of it into a cloud of dust. The Thai Defence Minister says 81 people are trapped beneath that rubble. 3 bodies have already been recovered from the site. With us to begin our coverage this hour, Panisa Aimocha. She's a reporter for BBC Thai. Thank you very much, Panisa, for being with us. Tell us where you are as the sun starts to go down. I'm sure there are plenty of anxious people in the city. What does it feel like there?
Yeah, so let's begin with I'm standing on the bridge that actually located near the collapsed building. If you can see behind me, this is more of the bird eye view into the buildings that collapsed. You can see over there, there's a pile of concrete from 30-story buildings that collapsed. Next to that, you can see that it's about 3-story tall at the moment, and rescue teams has been going inside since early in the afternoon. We have felt the shakiness of the earthquake at around 1 p.m. Thai time, and we already spoke, BBC Thai and BBC already spoke to 2 of the workers who were actually in that building at the time that there were earthquake, and we feel the shakiness, and they were running for their life. And as you already mentioned, at the top of that 30-story building construction, there were a crane, and one of the eyewitness, the worker that survived from that collapse, said that the moment he felt the shakiness, he looked back and he saw the crane on the top of the building was start shaking as well. He was just running for his life, and for a split moment, he thought he couldn't make it. So that's where we are.
We've had a statement from the Defence Minister who says they've pulled 3 bodies from the site. Do they have the teams on location at the moment? And do they know about the other 80 or so people that are trapped beneath it?
Yeah, so it has been reported that about 400 people were working on the site, and at the moment, about 69 is still missing. But you can see that the rescue team is still going because it's already sunset, and they've been setting light everywhere to try to make sure that they rescue everyone.
Let's talk about the wider situation. There is a state of emergency in place. What does that mean in real terms? What does that enable the government to do?
So basically, with Bangkok, the Bangkok governor is basically one of the main one, but also every department that related for the government trying to do this. And at the moment, we're sitting on the street that no particular ordinary car can walk by or can drive by because this street at the moment that led to the site of the collapsed building is already full of rescues and full of equipment to be used for this rescue team. So this emergency is really actually helped worker and also health rescue team to make sure that they can do their job efficiently.
So in terms of the critical infrastructure, the transport links, the roads, the power lines, a lot of that information still coming in. They've not had many hours to get information from outside Bangkok, but do we have a more considered assessment of how far-reaching the damage has been?
Yeah, so at the moment, we still have like internet and everything is still intact in line. Apart from this big collapsed building, and that's went online because of the very horrific scenes that everybody can see. There are also some report as well that some old buildings also have collapsed. And also you can see some crack. A lot of netizens also show that their condominium or their apartment, especially those with high rises, they start seeing cracks or windows start cracking down as well. Because actually, Thailand is really not familiar with this type of shakiness, with this type of earthquake. This is one of the first time for many Thai, especially those living in Bangkok, to feeling this shakiness. I was on the ground. I was at my house on the ground for the moment at 1 p.m. when it started to shake, and you start feeling dizziness to the level I never felt before.
Right. What will people do tonight? There'll be a lot of worry, a lot of fear in the city. We've seen pictures of people outside on the streets. I know people in Thailand are used to this sort of thing, but are people still feeling aftershocks? Is there concern there's more to come?
Yes, people are still concerned, especially earlier than this, because 2, 3 hours earlier, there's still report from an announcement from the government that warned that there will be aftershock coming. And it's been reported that at least 8 aftershocks coming in and happen after that 1 p.m. from big earthquake. And we can see that actually around me, local citizens still up here on the bridge along with all the media personnel to witness the rescue team. So people at the scene at Chatuchak area, which is actually nearby the famous Chatuchak market for all foreigners that come to join Thailand. So we still see people here want to know what happened. Some might fear, but a lot of citizens also go back to their house and stay informed. Mainly they're waiting for what to come next, what was being the announcement from the government, the advice to do, the advice for them.
Parisa, thank you very much for that. We'll no doubt come back to you through the course of the next few hours. Let's get a view then from someone else who was in Bangkok, the filmmaker Mick O'Shea. He was eating in a cafe when the earthquake struck, and he rushed to help at a nearby hospital that was evacuating its patients. I've seen some of those pictures actually. Where are you now? And what can you tell us about the picture around you?
Yeah, so I'm actually in a part of the King's Royal Palace in downtown Bangkok, which is attached to a hospital, and they're called the King Mongkut Hospital. And I happened to be having a meal there when the earthquake hit. And like everyone else, I rushed outside and to try and get away from the high-rise buildings because there was actually masonry and bits of concrete falling off the high-rises and landing on the streets. So me and a bunch of people run across the road to a park, and then I noticed that the hospital was being evacuated, and it was quite chaotic because they started bringing people out in wheelchairs and stretcher beds, but then they must have run out of wheelchairs and stretcher beds. They were carrying people out by their arms and legs and on people's backs. So I ran in to try and help evacuate the hospital. And I helped rescue one lady in a wheelchair, get her outside into the park, and I went back to get someone else, and then the security wouldn't let me in. But when I went back, I saw that there was a car parked on the road, like where I was running back and forth, and there was about like 200 kilos of concrete and masonry had landed on the car, smashed all the front windscreen, the whole bonnet was smashed in, so it had obviously fallen from a great height. And it was very clear that if anyone was in the way of that, they wouldn't survive. So it was quite intimidating to see that much stuff falling off the buildings.
I imagine so. Have you been in an earthquake before?
I have actually, yeah. I was in a 7.9 Richter scale earthquake in Indonesia once before, and I was right near the epicenter, so that was a lot stronger. But there wasn't a lot of high rises around there, so I think actually I felt safer in the 7.9 right near the epicenter than I did today in Bangkok, because there was a lot of high rises around me with projectiles falling off them.
How long did it last?
It lasted, I would say, at least a minute. So, like it started when I was in this food court, and I had time to get out of the food court, get across the street into the park, and the things were still swaying. I'd say at least a minute.
Yeah, I know. I mean, this is a subjective question, and it's difficult, I know, from where you are to give a sort of assessment. But news drifts in quite slowly at the beginning of these sort of disasters. Do you get a sense that we don't know the half of it at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I can say I walked past about 4 buildings between where I kind of helped to evacuate the building to the park, and just along those 4 buildings, there was hundreds of kilos, and these were quite new buildings. Hundreds of kilos of concrete that had fallen off from great height and landed on the street. And I can only assume that it's a similar circumstance all across the city. And this is a city of 17 million people with thousands of high-rise buildings. So I think it must be similar throughout the city, I assume.
And have you given thought as to where you'll go tonight, what you will do?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Have you given any thought as to where you'll go tonight and what you will do?
The first thing I'm going to do when I leave the hospital here and get back to my apartment is I'm going to do a bit of a structural assessment and figure out whether I want to sleep there tonight. So I'm going to do a good walk around all of the car parks and the structural areas that I can access and see if there's any cracks.
Yeah, that sounds pretty sensible to me. And just in terms of the patients that were evacuated from the hospital, have they been taken back in, or are they now being treated outside?
So there's about 100 people in this room behind me, and they are all the patients of the hospital. There's over 1,000 people evacuated. Most of them haven't been let back into the hospital yet because it hasn't been cleared by the authorities as being structurally safe. So they're actually going to spend the night here. And I know for a fact that there was 2 people who had heart attacks just during the evacuation. So obviously there's a lot of risks that come with these sorts of things that carry on after the initial event. So all these people that should be in ICUs tonight, they're actually in these makeshift rooms outside of hospitals.
Goodness me, quite a situation. Mick, it's really good to talk to you. You take care. Thank you very much for coming on the programme.
Thank you. I'm sorry it's a bit noisy here.
No, don't worry. We know it's there's a lot of commotion in Bangkok at the moment. And now we've seen other pictures from around the city of Bangkok of water pouring down the side of high-rise buildings. This is water that's been sloshing out of the swimming pools on the top of the more upmarket skyscrapers. In Myanmar, we've been looking at pictures of the Ava Bridge near Mandalay. It was first built by the British Army in 1934. It spans the Irrawaddy River. There are 16 sections to this bridge, but you will see there that many of them are now in the water. It's not clear if anyone was hurt, but it's a pretty old bridge, that one. And you will see as we pan to the right that there's another crossing just next to it, which was more recently built, which appears to be still standing. We're going to get a more considered view from Myanmar just after this break. Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News. Right, we're going to continue our coverage of the situation in Myanmar and Bangkok. If you are just joining us, we can tell you that there was a 7.7 earthquake which shook the region for hundreds of miles. 10 kilometres doesn't, to a layman like me, it sounds quite deep, but actually in geological terms, that is pretty shallow. And you'll see from the pictures we're looking at the moment, these are in central Bangkok. This is the multi-storey building that was under construction. That is what is left. It is now bathed in light. These are artificial lights because the sun has gone down. And you'll see there in the foreground the rescue workers assessing the scene. From our correspondent who we've just spoken to, there are around 60 people, we think, who are underneath that building. But you can see how tricky that is going to be to extract anybody from that alive. It's a very difficult and serious situation. Let's speak to Dr. Richard Luckett. He's a seismologist at the British Geological Survey. Doctor, it's good to have you with us. Talk to me about an earthquake like this, 7.7 magnitude at a depth of 10 miles. What does that mean to a seismologist like you?
Well, as you say, it is pretty shallow in geological terms. And in fact, it has reached the surface because an earthquake like this is big, which means that the fault that has moved is 200 kilometers long. At the longest point, it's moved about 5 meters. And in height, it's come up from 10 kilometers down all the way to the surface. So it's a really large rock interface that has moved to cause an earthquake this big.
Right. OK. So what is happening in that part of the world to create an earthquake of that magnitude?
It's plate tectonics. The India plate is shifting north. It's actually what's causing the Himalayas. The India plate is piling into the Eurasian plate in China and pushing up the Himalayas, which are growing constantly. And in this particular place, the India plate is moving north about 5 centimeters a year. But to the east of it, the plate, a different plate, is not moving nearly as much. So what you've got is the western part of the land moving more than the eastern chunk, and you've got this massive fault right on that boundary.
I know you're always asked this question, but what does it mean going forward in the days ahead? Can you predict at all the size of the aftershocks and how many there might be?
Well, no, but you can forecast that there will be a lot of aftershocks. Many of them will be big enough to be felt. And some of them, like the first one, the 6.4, will be damaging in their own right. They tend to drop off with size. So you get the biggest aftershocks soon after the earthquake. As the days and the weeks go by, the aftershocks will continue. But in general, they'll get smaller.
We're trying to put our finger on the scale of what we're dealing with here. For someone who has vast experience of earthquakes, what would you assess will be the damage across these 3 countries?
Well, certainly the damage in Myanmar will be big. I mean, look at the damage in Bangkok, and you think that's 1,000 kilometers away. The actual earthquake was only 16 kilometers away from a city with 1.2 million people in. We think there's sort of maybe well over 2 million people within the area of maximum shaking. So we can expect a lot of casualties, I'm afraid.
Right. There are buildings in Bangkok that are built to withstand earthquakes. Does the integrity of these high-rise buildings depend on the type of earthquake that it is?
Not if it's engineered properly. I mean, if you go to Tokyo, the skyscrapers there are built to withstand very large earthquakes of a variety of different types. In general, Bangkok, that's not the case, just because they don't get very many earthquakes. I mean, it's not in an earthquake zone. So if you feel an earthquake in Bangkok, it's very likely to be one in Myanmar. So, the earthquake is much further away from Bangkok, and the engineering is not done in the same way there.
Dr. Richard Luckett, thank you very much for that. That gives us some idea of what we're talking about. Let's find out what it felt like. We can speak to the BBC's Lyndall Markwell, who is in Bangkok, near one of those collapsed buildings. She's our senior producer in Bangkok. Where were you at the time of the earthquake?
I was at home and only on the first floor when the earthquake hit, and I actually just thought I was having a dizzy spell. Then I left my flat, went downstairs. The ground floor has a pool in it, and the water even on the ground floor pool was sloshing out of it. As we left the building, we then started to see the high rises around us. I saw at least two buildings with pools on the top having water cascading down the side of the building, as you've probably seen in some of these pictures today. But I've now come across the city. It took me over an hour on a motorbike, weaving in and out of traffic with sirens wailing and ambulances trying to get through. Much thicker traffic, mostly gridlock, to be honest, than we normally see in Bangkok, although it's a city of bad traffic. And I've come across to the north west of the city, to Chatuchak, where this collapsed building is. The Thai Prime Minister has been here this evening. She's at the site at the moment, we understand. She has said this is the site of the most severe damage in Bangkok, and across the rest of the city, they now say that the other high rises are safe for people to return to, and they haven't sustained as much damage as we might have been concerned about earlier.
They've worked very quickly, Lyndall, to get the artificial lighting in place before the sun went down. But we're seeing in the foreground here a group of rescue workers standing and looking at the construction. Is it? I mean, it's just an extraordinary pile of rubble. Is it at this moment a case of trying to find the best way in?
I think so. I think one of the problems they've had so far this afternoon is they didn't have the correct machinery down here to start the rescue process. So we have seen in the last half hour some of the diggers coming in. They're waiting for some large cranes to start that process as well. We have hundreds of firefighters, medical staff. They've set up a field hospital down here. But they haven't been able to start moving things on the site yet. I think they're hoping to do that imminently, but we're still waiting for that to start.
I know you're gathering for us, Lyndall, so we'll let you go. Thank you very much for the moment for that. We've had a little bit on the tectonic plates. Let's get some more. Our science reporter, Esme Stallard, is here in the studio with more detail. Hi.
Hi, Christian. So behind me, I've got this map from the US Geological Survey, and they are the group that monitor earthquakes globally and first flagged this earthquake. Now, the first one we know struck at about 6:20 GMT, or around lunchtime local time, and that's that big orange dot here, which I've now just highlighted blue. But then 12 minutes later, we got a series of aftershocks, and there was another one just south of that first one, which was also very significant. And we had further north as well, some more occurring. Now, we've heard about tectonic plates. So what are they? Effectively, the Earth's crust, that upper layer of the Earth, is split into lots of different plates, and they are all moving past each other, and that creates a lot of friction. Now, the main plates in this area are the Eurasian plate, which is up here, and the Indian plate. And as they move, a lot of stress builds up, and that gets released as a lot of energy. In this case, there is a major fault, the Sergei Fault, which is more than 1,000 kilometres long, running very close to here, where we think at this time maybe a lot of that energy has been released. Now, we know it's a 7.7 earthquake. What does that mean? Effectively, that is the amount of movement along those plates, and this is huge. I mean, we've heard already about the size of the damage in Bangkok, and that is 1,000 kilometres south of here. We're still waiting to hear about the level of damage actually at the epicenter, but the reason we're so concerned is that even though this area is very active, we're actually concerned that it is a very shallow earthquake, and that means that it was only 10 kilometres below the surface, and that's why you got so much impact on other countries surrounding it as well. So not only Myanmar, but also Thailand, China and Bangladesh as well. So at the moment, we're still waiting for more information, but it's not surprising that we had this earthquake. But what is concerning is the sheer scale of the impact. I'll hand back to you, Kristen.
Esme, thank you very much. It's really interesting to see that actually in visual terms. I think it'll give our viewers an idea of just how extensive things are in that region of Southeast Asia. I'm just looking at some of the pictures on our screens of these rescue workers going in and out of this construction in central Bangkok. Many of you will have seen on social media the collapse of that building. There were quite a lot of cameras on it at the time with this crane on top, and it just imploded inwards with the crane collapsing into the rubble, just in a pile of dust, with workers that were on the ground running in every direction. But we think, according to our correspondent, there are 60 people unaccounted for beneath that rubble. But how on earth through the night they begin to get into that structure, that is clearly a lot of the focus at the moment, and it's going to be a very difficult task. Now, I'm conscious that we focused an awful lot on Thailand so far, but we have Rebecca Heshka with us in the studio. She's a former Asia editor. We're going to get her thoughts after the break. There is no one who knows Myanmar better, I can tell you that. So we'll get an impression of what the junta might be doing, what the conditions in Myanmar might be like, and who is there to help them, because it is rare, in fact, for the junta to ask for outside help. That perhaps tells you of the size of and scale of things that they are dealing with there. Plenty more to come. Do stay with us here on BBC News.
Hello. A few changes on the way in the coming days. And we're not just talking only about the weather, but of course, on Saturday night and Sunday morning, the clocks go forward. British summertime begins, light evenings ahead. And it seems like the weather will get the memo by then, because over the next few days, it is going to be cooler than it has been, with some rain at times, more especially in the north and the west. But from Sunday onwards, dry conditions dominate and it's going to warm up, feeling like early summer, never mind through the middle part of spring. Now, the changes come courtesy first, the weather fronts today, putting us into blue, the colder air, but then notice the warmer oranges and yellows start to reappear through Sunday and onwards as high pressure starts to build. But for today, temperatures down on recent days. There's the rain, which pushed across the southeast and East Anglia through the morning. Sunshine out into the afternoon, isolated shower across southern eastern parts of England, but north and west England and Wales, 1 or 2 showers, frequent showers in Scotland, Northern Ireland. Cold, windy day here as well. The showers with hail, thunder, sleet and snow in the hills, with temperatures in the city centres only around 8 or 9 degrees. Stays windy tonight in the north of Scotland. Further showers for a while, becoming more confined to the very far north later, with clearer skies elsewhere tonight. A cold night than last night. Last night we're largely frost-free. Greater chance more of us will see a frost into the start of Saturday morning. But it will be a bright and sunny start for the vast majority. Make the most of the morning though in western Scotland, Northern Ireland, because it will turn grey here. Outbreaks of rain developing, heaviest and most persistent in the northwest of Scotland, accompanied by strengthening winds again. Nice morning, western parts of England and Wales, cloudier into the afternoon. Some splashes of rain around Irish Sea coast. But further east you are, you'll stick with sunny spells, even if they turn hazy into the second half of the day. Temperatures very similar to today's values. Through Saturday night into Sunday, we've got the windy conditions spreading across the north, gradually easing through, and then this ridge of high pressure builds in. Now, there will be a legacy of cloud just stretching across the UK to begin with. That will gradually thin and break. Brisk winds to begin with will gradually ease down, and with more sunshine around through the afternoon, especially for England, Wales and southern Scotland, temperatures are back on the up. Could see them peak at around 16 to 18 degrees in some eastern parts of England in particular. And that's just the start. Next week, whilst the mornings will be chilly with some mist and fog, we could see temperatures widely into the mid, not high teens, if not low 20s. You can see the temperature trend where you are, of course, on the BBC Weather app. Take care.
We've been seeing the fires, destruction, smoke so thick we can barely see in front of us.
The verdicts have come in, all guilty, and now the sentences are being read out by the judge.
I'm Anna Foster here in Tel Aviv on an important day, a day when the ceasefire has finally come into effect.
The residents here are seeing their high street turned into a river, the second time in as many years.
There when the story breaks. On BBC News. Follow on the app.
The BBC Make a Difference Awards celebrate remarkable people. And it's time to shine a light on those who make our communities special. Whether you know a great neighbour, a real community hero, or even an amazing animal, we want to hear from you. For a full list of categories and details on how to nominate, go to bbc.co.uk/make-a-difference, where you can see our full terms and privacy notice. Nominations are open now and close on the 31st of March at 5 p.m. The BBC Make a Difference Awards 2025, celebrating people who make a difference where you live.
Newscast is different to the stuff that we all do in our day jobs because it's like a proper chat.
Something big's just happened. And then we're just like, right, gonna do an episode. We've all tried to get together. We're just all working something out. And then you sort of have a eureka moment.
What you need to know when you need to know it.
Newscast. Listen every day on BBC Sounds.
You're watching BBC News. The headlines. The military junta in Myanmar says it needs outside help after a powerful earthquake wreaked severe damage across the country. There have been huge tremors felt right across Southeast Asia. A high-rise building under construction has collapsed in central Bangkok with 90 people on site. State of emergency is in place across Thailand. The emergency workers there in your picture searching for any survivors that might be trapped in the rubble. The Israeli military says it is carrying out airstrikes against Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon. Israel has issued an evacuation order to residents in the Hadath district of southern Beirut. And King Charles has left his London residence Clarence House this morning for Highgrove to rest. He has cancelled today's official duties after suffering the side effects of his cancer treatment. So, as we've been discussing, the epicentre of this earthquake was in Myanmar. To be honest, we're still trying to get a sense of the scale, which I'm not sure we're getting yet. The internet is down, power lines are down. The Red Cross have already told us they are struggling to get around. What we have been focusing on are the pictures of this bridge, the Ava Bridge. I'm not quite sure how it's pronounced, but it crosses one of the main rivers. This is the Sagai region where some of the fiercest fighting has been concentrated. There are 16 sections to that bridge. You can see most of them are in the Irrawaddy River now, so that is going to create real problems. Although as we pan to the right there, you'll see a more modern bridge is still intact. With me in the studio is our former Asia editor, Rebecca Heshka, who's an expert on Myanmar and the military junta that rules the country. So let's begin, if we could, please, with the political situation in the country and the fighting, because it was already a very difficult situation.
It was. This earthquake has hit Myanmar at possibly the worst time. For the last 4 years, Myanmar has been in the grips of a fierce civil war. The Myanmar military seized power in a coup. There are now pro-democracy rebels who are fighting the military to try and overtopple them, to bring a democratic government into power. And the Sagai region where this earthquake, the epicenter of this earthquake hit, is a key battleground in that civil war. It's where we've seen some of the fiercest fighting between these pro-democracy groups that call themselves the People's Defence Forces and the military. So the military's been carrying out airstrikes in that area. And also, we recently investigated who's now in control of Myanmar 4 years after the coup. And particularly when you looked at Sagai, it was almost like a patchwork because the military no longer has full control of that region. There's different resistance groups. So that's going to be very key when we look at the relief and recovery area, the recovery of this area after this devastating earthquake.
We know them as the Tatmadaw, the junta. There are some estimates that they only control around 20% of the country now, largely the urban areas. Is it rare for them to invite outside help in?
Definitely. This plea for help is a sign of the serious situation that they're facing. We see on your programme, we're seeing pictures coming out of Thailand, a detailed picture. But in Myanmar, we're not getting that level of information. And that's because the Tatmadaw, the military, has effectively shut the country off from the outside world. Foreign journalists are banned in the country. Independent media is effectively banned. Foreign aid groups are having to work through local partners. They're very, very isolated. And that's how they operate. So for them to say, yes, we need help, is a huge admission of how serious the situation is in the country.
Who is in there? I mean, what sort of agencies and organisations are able to offer immediate help?
Most of the big organisations, Red Cross, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the UN agencies, they're all working through local partners. But they are already warning. I mean, the United Nations just recently warned that the country is already facing a dire situation. They're saying a third of the country would need aid this year. That's before the earthquake. They're talking about 3 million people have been displaced from their homes because of the civil war. So all the aid agencies are now saying, OK, the Tatmadaw, the junta has asked for help. That needs to be unrestricted access to the country. That means foreign nationals being able to come in. The full force of what a normal aid operation looks like needs to happen. That's unlikely.
But as you've just described, that's not an easy situation. I mean, you've got tens of thousands, nearly 1 million people internally displaced, and a civil war underway.
Exactly.
So to reach the more remote areas where they may need this aid would be a brave endeavour for any agency.
It will be very difficult. And also going back to that, who's in control? I mean, the government doesn't have access to large areas. We've spoken to Myanmar soldiers who say they're scared to leave their barracks in certain areas. So even if the military wanted to roll out an aid relief program, they would be restricted in doing that. And people are just struggling with basic needs at the moment. And there's a lack of coordinated control that will make this aid relief effort extremely difficult.
Fascinating. It's really good context. Rebecca, thank you for coming into the studio. We'll keep in touch through the course of the day because plenty more news coming out of Myanmar. We will get more reaction from across the region, but I do just want to focus for a short time on the other news because there is some important news coming from the Middle East today. The Israeli military is again striking Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon, and it's warned civilians in southern Beirut they need to leave. The airstrikes resumed this morning after a series of missiles were fired from Lebanese territory into Israel. Hezbollah were quick to respond, denying any involvement in that, insisting they were still committed to the truce. The Lebanese Prime Minister has since instructed the National Army to arrest whoever it was that fired the rockets, but since then the Israeli army has been hitting back. There's been a drone strike on an apartment block in southern Beirut, which I think has been followed up by an airstrike. That was viewed, the drone strike at least, as a warning strike. And that was the first strike in Beirut since November. So as you can see, there are now reports of people on the streets fleeing the southern suburbs in cars and on foot. Lebanon's Ministry of Education has ordered schools and a university in that area to evacuate. The UN is calling for restraint. Let's speak to Hugo Bechega, who joins us from Jerusalem. It's a fast evolving situation, this, Hugo. What are you hearing?
Yeah, Christian, I'm actually here in Beirut, and just to give you an update on what happened. So you mentioned those warnings that had been issued by the Israeli military, and 2 hours later, the attack hitting a building that the Israeli army said was being used by Hezbollah. It said it was a building that was storing drones belonging to Hezbollah in Beirut's southern suburbs. The first time that the Israeli military hit Beirut since the beginning of the ceasefire back in November. And when those warnings were issued, I wasn't really far from that part of the city, which is where Hezbollah is based here in Beirut. There was a lot of panic, there was a lot of chaos of people trying to flee those parts of the city. So again, a lot of people, life had returned to normal here in Beirut with the ceasefire. But again, the first time that the city comes under attack since this deal was implemented back in November. The Israeli military saying was responding to rockets that had been fired from southern Lebanon. One rocket was intercepted earlier today in northern Israel. And again, the Israeli authorities saying that they will continue to target Hezbollah if these attacks continue. So putting a lot of pressure on this fragile ceasefire that has been in place since November.
These are the archive pictures. I'm going to put the live pictures up in a second for our viewers so they can see what it looks like right now, Hugo. But, I mean, there you go. There's clearly some confusion as to who fired the rockets from southern Lebanon into Israel. Hezbollah saying it wasn't us. The Israeli army's been instructed to go and find out who it was that fired the rockets. Who else is operating in southern Lebanon besides Hezbollah?
Yeah, it is a complicated picture because Hezbollah, which is obviously the largest military group operating in Lebanon, has denied any kind of involvement in the attack that happened today, which is the second attack from Lebanon in a week. There are a number of Palestinian factions operating in southern Lebanon as well, Hamas, Islamic Jihad. There hasn't been any claim of responsibility from those groups. But again, it really shows the challenge that the Lebanese authorities are facing in trying to control those areas in the south where these militants have been operating for decades. And again, what we're seeing is that despite the ceasefire that has been in place here, the Israeli military has continued to carry out attacks on targets, on people it says are linked to Hezbollah. It says it will continue to attack Hezbollah to prevent the group from rearming. So the situation here, despite the ceasefire, has continued to be very tense, very violent. One of those attacks earlier today in response to the rockets that were fired killed 3 people, according to the Lebanese authorities, including a woman. And a lot of people here reacting to what happened in Beirut, saying that they simply cannot believe that we have returned to a situation where Beirut is being attacked by the Israeli military.
Yeah, a serious development. Things are unravelling to the north and to the south of Israel at the moment. We'll continue to keep an eye on that. Hugo, for the moment, thank you so much. The US Vice President J.D. Vance is travelling to Greenland today, where he'll receive a briefing on Arctic security issues. President Trump has repeated his claims that US national security requires the annexation of Greenland, and Russia's President Vladimir Putin thinks Mr. Trump is being serious. Our chief presenter, Mariam Mashiri, is in Nuuk for us this morning. Not invited and not very welcome, Mariam.
Not really, Christian, no. And look, you know, originally, the original plan, if we think all the way back to a week or so ago, was Usha Vance, the second lady, planning to come here with her son to relax, to meet some people in the capital, to perhaps watch a bit of dog sledding, visit some cultural centres. But that plan met with a lot of resistance. And so eventually that plan changed. J.D. Vance, the vice president, said, look, I'm going to be joining my wife, and it's going to be a much more laid-back affair. So a perfunctory visit to the space base up in the northwest of the island. That visit will happen in a couple of hours' time. It'll last for a few hours. He'll be joined by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, potentially also Chris Wright, the Energy Secretary, and another senator or two. But it's nowhere near the level of engagement that was planned originally. Far less fun, far more of a formality. And J.D. Vance said very clearly, didn't he, in that video message, that he wants to, in his words, check out the security situation in Greenland. Now, Greenlanders are not happy. They really did not want this visit. In their minds, they believe that America is vying for Greenland in a way that is just not particularly viable. Also, a lot of people here telling me that Greenland is not for sale. They feel very uneasy about everything that's been going on. Those who oppose this visit do see that backtracking by America, the paring back of this visit, as a bit of a success. And there are also political issues as well in Greenland. Today, the Greenland Democrats are going to announce their new coalition government. There was an election here a couple of weeks ago. So a lot is going on. I'm here just by the sea in the edge of Nuuk. It's absolutely gorgeous here. You can see the ice behind me. And I'm joined by content creator and newly elected politician Kuupannuk Olsen, who is here with me. Kuupannuk, it's so good to speak to you. It's freezing cold here, but it's absolutely beautiful. Tell me a little bit about why Greenlanders are so angry about this visit.
I think we are afraid of being colonized again. We have been under colony for the last 300 years under Denmark, which it still feels like it, and now another colonizer is interested in us. So it's worrying that we will experience a second stage of colonization.
Is Mr. Trump being taken seriously when he says about Greenland, I have to have it?
Yes, the minute Donald Trump Jr. arrived that's when we realized that his words are no longer just words. He actually means what he says. So yeah, we do believe, and I kind of understand his need, that he feels he needs the control over the sea area of Greenland military-wise. So yeah, I kind of understand what he means by that. But I'm not thinking that he's interested in taking over our lives here in Nuuk or in other places.
So what is it you want to see? Do you want closer relations with the United States?
For Greenland's independence, we need to collaborate and do business with other countries than just Denmark. So we need to be open for business with the US, Canada, other places in Europe. So yeah, we need to be open-minded, and President Trump will only be the president for the next 4 years. So we also need to think about what's going to happen in 10 years, in 20 years, because there's great business opportunities, in my opinion, and also tourism opportunities from the States. So yeah.
I spoke to a lot of people yesterday, and a lot of them were saying to me, look, you know, we feel this intense pressure on us from the United States, and that's not what we want to be thinking about. We want to be thinking about moving forward towards an independent Greenland. Do you think this is distracting people from that eventual goal?
I think the interest from the US has made many Greenlanders realize that we are much, much more worth, that we have a stronger voice than we thought we had. So the US showing interest in Greenland is a huge wake-up call. So Greenlanders now are more willing to have an opinion whether we should become independent or not. So I think it's good and bad with all this attention.
Okay, Kuupinuk, it's lovely to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and good luck with your political career moving forward. So Kuupinuk there mentioned Denmark. Now, this is a semi-autonomous region. It's basically been under Danish control for around 300 years. And Denmark is everywhere here. The Danish kroner is the currency used. There are Danish products in the supermarkets. And the new election really has put a spotlight on Greenlanders' desire to move further away from Denmark and to bring in more of a sense of independence. Let's cross live now and speak to Danish politician Rasmus Jarlov, who's also head of the Danish Defence Committee. Rasmus, so good to speak to you. Thanks for joining us on BBC News. And let me ask you, first of all, for your reaction to the Vance's visit today to Greenland.
It's quite normal and very fine that the vice president wants to visit American troops in Greenland. They have the space base in northwestern Greenland, which is the only military presence that they have. And it's fine that he visits the soldiers. The problem is that it has been accompanied by statements from the president himself and other top-ranking American politicians about annexing Greenland, which is not acceptable to us and not acceptable to the people of Greenland. And it's quite unheard of that allied countries start talking about forcefully annexing parts of each other's territory. Of course, it's like if the American president went to Scotland and wanted to start a campaign for them to separate from Britain and become part of the United States. It wouldn't go down well either, I think.
Do you take him seriously?
Well, it has been repeated so many times by now that we have to take it seriously. They obviously mean it. They want to annex Greenland, and I expect they will put a lot of pressure on us in the coming time. We can see at the moment how they're treating Canada, that they also have a desire to annex, and I think we can expect the same very tough pressure in the coming months and years. So I think it's going to be a very tough period for relations over the Atlantic, and particularly between Denmark and the United States.
Now let's talk a little bit about the relations between Denmark and Greenland itself, because there is a movement, isn't there, here to move Greenland closer to independence. We all know that Greenland is able, since 2009, if it wants to, declare its own independence from Denmark. It's chosen not to do that, but it's a complicated relationship, is it not?
Yeah, well, it's not as complicated as people trying to make it. You know, they have the offer that they can get independence if they want it. So the fight for independence is not a fight between Denmark and Greenland. It's a fight for the Greenlandic society to be able to take care of themselves as an independent country, which is a big challenge. It's a big task because it's only 50,000 people. If you take the Danes out of Greenland, there will be 50,000 people left. and they have to manage a territory which is the world's 12th largest country. So it's not easy. And today they get a direct subsidy from Denmark, which pays for half of all public expenses. And on top of that, Denmark takes care of a lot of things, as you mentioned: currency, police, the court system, defense, many other things are done by Denmark free of charge. So I do believe that most people in Greenland realize that it would be very, very difficult for them to become independent tomorrow. And therefore, I don't think it's imminent. They've had a desire to become independent for 50 years. And maybe it will happen one day, but I don't think you should expect it to happen in the coming few years.
Rasmus Jarlov, it's good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. So, Christian, as the northwest of the island, the US space base awaits this flying visit, those who originally opposed this visit, they do feel like the backtracking, the paring back of plans is a small victory for the islanders. Given what they've been through over the last few weeks, it's a victory I'm sure that many of them will take for now.
Yeah, we'll continue to watch that, Mariam. It does look beautiful there, although, as you say, very cold. Have you taken good shoes? Are you wearing good shoes?
I've borrowed some shoes. I've borrowed a lot of stuff, to be honest, Christian. I'm not really a cold weather person. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a BBC issue hat, but I'm refusing to wear it because it takes away from my natural beauty. But hold on, I'm going to grab the hat now. Here it is. Here's the hat. I'm going to show you what the hat looks like and explain to you why.
Did they really put
that is why I do not want the hat.
Did they really put that on the risk assessment? I'm with you, Mariam. Keep well clear of that. We'll come back to you shortly. Thank you very much indeed. JD Vance incoming in the next couple. Mariam Moshiri there in Greenland. We'll take a short break. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. Welcome back. Our BBC colleague Mark Lowen is back in London after being detained and deported from Turkey this week. Mark and his team had been in Istanbul for several days covering the ongoing street protests sparked by the arrest of the city's mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu. There were several other Western journalists that were arrested too this week. I think most of them have now been freed. But in a statement, the CEO of BBC News, Deborah Turness, said it's an extremely troubling incident and we will be making representations to the Turkish authorities. Mark is a very experienced correspondent with a deep knowledge of Turkey. No journalist should face this kind of treatment simply for doing their job. We will continue to report impartially and fairly on events in Turkey. I'm very pleased to say that Mark is with us in the studio, not where he should be. He was presenting for this programme from Istanbul on Tuesday. But I'm glad to see you safe and well. Let's start with the arrest. Where were you? What were you doing at the time?
I had arrived in Istanbul on Sunday night, back to Turkey because I was the BBC Turkey correspondent for 5 years between 2014 and 19. So I went on Sunday to cover these protests sparked by the arrest of the mayor. And then on Wednesday, I was in my hotel preparing for another day of reporting, and the phone rang in the hotel room. And the receptionist said, we've got something to discuss with you in person, an urgent matter. Could you come down? And I said, can we speak on the phone? And they said, no, we need to speak to you in person. So I went down to reception and I was met by 3 plainclothes policemen who said I needed my passport, and they took me away to the main Istanbul police headquarters. And I was there initially for 7 hours, which was a very long time to be in that first location. And I was allowed to have a couple of BBC colleagues there. I couldn't use my phone, but they could. We had lawyers there, and the the atmosphere at the start was quite cordial. They were saying, look, some of them, we don't agree with this. This is a state decision. We want you to be free. One of them hugged me at the end and said, you know, you're a good man. I want you to be free. And then I was taken off at 9:30 p.m. on my own without my colleagues to the second location, which was the Foreigner Custody Department of the Istanbul Police. And there I was fingerprinted. The atmosphere hardened somewhat. I was not mistreated at any time, I have to be clear. But then I was taken to a third location, which was a custody unit at the airport. And they told me I was being deported for, in their words, being a threat to public order. So it was a 17-hour detention in total. When I asked whether I'd be able to go back to Turkey, one policeman said, I'm not sure, we'll have to check that. And then he suggested that he could take a video of me saying that I was going to leave of my own accord, and he could show that to his bosses. I would be able to go back to Turkey, no problem, and everything would be fine. So I declined that because that would have ended up on the Turkish pro-government media to push their narrative and their version of the story. And then they put me on a deportation flight at 8 a.m. back to London.
And you'd had no sleep for 40 hours?
By the time I got to bed last night, 40 hours, but right. 17 hours in detention, and, you know, it was very hard to sleep.
That statement, this is a state decision. Have you given any thought to who made the order?
I think it will have come from a senior figure at government level, probably from the communications office of the Turkish president. I asked them what they meant by that, and they said this is a decision by the state. We don't have any more information. Several hours after I arrived back in London, the Turkish government press office put out a statement saying that I lack the necessary accreditation to cover the protests. But they, at no point had they made reference to that during my detention. And it very much appeared to be a sort of an afterthought attempt at justifying my detention. And I have to say that even though I told the police during the detention, we were going to cover this will become an international issue to some extent, they waved it off. But there has been quite an outcry, and it's been all over the international media, so it very much appeared that they rushed to find an excuse.
Mark, it's good to see you back in London. I know it's not where you want to be, but thank you very much for that. And of course, there's going to be plenty more reaction to that, as there already has been, actually, from European governments. You're watching BBC News. Do stay with us.